on, guys? Calvin Russell here. Today we're going to talk to you guys about how to cancel a contract and what that process is like. Let's go into it. So the first thing is to understand when you're under contract, you are supposed to follow some legal guidelines, okay? Not just you, because you may be the seller, you may be the buyer, but the other side of the party as well too, okay? What does that mean? That means that even though you, the seller, you didn't necessarily give earnest money, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not financially obligated if you decide to sell a home. Promise that you're going to sell that home by signing that contract that you're going to sell that home, but then changing your mind for whatever reason. And I've seen that happen before, and we'll get to that in a second. Typically, when contracts are canceled, it's usually from the buyer side. And it can be various things. Sometimes buyers put in multiple offers, and then the second best house that they love, they accepted their offer. The first house didn't accept their offer. So they're like, okay, cool, I'll go ahead and go with house number 2. Something happens with house number 1 while you're in the process of doing the inspection or doing whatever with house number 2. And then you say, you know what? I'm just going to back out of this deal and go back to house number 1 because now house number 1 is available again. Okay. If you do that, that's considered just changing your mind. If you change your mind, you're more than likely not going to be able to get your earnest money back because there's nothing that protects you to change your mind. Now, could you take that house number 2 a little bit further, like doing an inspection, getting the inspection report and using that as the reason to cancel the deal? You most definitely could do so. However, the seller is not necessarily obligated to give you your earnest money back. Now, here's the thing. Every state's going to have slightly different laws on this. That doesn't mean that the seller can keep your money. I want you guys to understand something. The money never went to the seller. The money goes to whoever is holding that money. The seller's not allowed to hold that money. So it's going to be a title company, an attorney, or an earnest money holding company, which typically is electronic, okay? And those are usually the top 3 people that hold earnest money. It's a third party. And that third party is, they're supposed to confirm that, hey, both sides have agreed to let the other person get the earnest money or let the seller keep the earnest money. If you don't have that agreement, then the earnest money is not going to be dispersed and the state is going to end up keeping it. Now, of course, every state's going to handle things a little bit differently. It just really depends. Some people go to court for it. Again, most things can really be solved just by being honest, okay? So let's give you some reasons on when you can cancel a contract, okay? Number 1 is going to be, of course, we already talked about you can't just do it because you're changing your mind. But number 1 is usually going to end up being the inspection, okay? So when you go under contract, you're going to have about 5 business days typically, or 7 calendar days. Just depends on, of course, what state you're in and how the contract is drawn up. But 5 to 7 days to go ahead and get your inspection scheduled and send it over, if you're going to ask for repairs or if you're just going to close it out and just move forward with the deal. If you don't like the results from the inspection, then that is grounds to go ahead and cancel the contract. Now, of course, you want to buy a home. The seller wants to sell a home. Don't take it personal if the seller says, hey, I know you want to cancel the contract because of the inspection, but what if I'm willing to make repairs to this property? Would you be open to staying in the property? Or open to, continuing with, buying the property? And of course, you got to expect the seller to do that. But some buyers, they say, no, it's just too many repairs, this. There is no right or wrong reason, but some sellers will drag out that process. I've had a deal recently where the buyers got the inspection report. They gave the list of things that they wanted fixed. They got the inspection report, and there was so many things that was on there that they said, you know what, we don't even want to move forward with this house. Seller says, hey, let me at least find out what those items are. My buyer said, no, we just want to just move on. They said, are you sure you just don't want to let me know? And I told my buyers that they were going to kind of press, because it's not about the earnest money. It's about keeping a deal, especially in this market right now. Right now, we're in a buyer's market. There was a seller's market a couple years ago. Now buyers really got the power. But again, it's going to swing again, soon, and that's just how real estate works, okay? So that's the first way, is going to be the inspection. The second way is going to be through attorney review. Now, technically, attorney review is from start to finish. That's any time that there is a disagreement. I've had deals fall apart at the very beginning when the seller says, hey, I want to use this title company. And the buyer says, well, I don't want to use that title company. They cost a certain amount of money. Well, that's the only people I use. Oh, well, this deal is canceled then. Those are rare moments. but attorney review is pretty much toward all the way up until about clear to close or so. In my personal opinion, legally, it kind of stops around after like the appraisal or so. But again, every state is going to be slightly different because your attorney is always there. There can always be something that pops up. And I've seen people cancel deals. And I had a deal canceled the day of closing simply because there was a repair that the seller said was done. We did come through the final walkthrough, and then my buyer says, man, if this ain't done, I wonder what other things that they did not complete. You know what? I'm done. I'm like, well, we're supposed to be at closing. I don't care. I'm done. And I'm like, okay, he ended up losing his earnest money, by the way, because you can't just do it like that, especially when now you can't make a seller fix something, but the seller agreed to fix it. And there are certain times where the sellers agreed to fix something, but the buyers don't like how it was fixed, or they don't like how it looks when it was fixed. Either way, that's where the attorneys come together, and the buyer has an attorney, the seller has an attorney. Some states do not require you to have an attorney, but I strongly recommend you have an attorney just to make sure you have things in place, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, or even if this is your 10th home. Unless you're an investor, that's the only people where I say you may not necessarily have to always have an attorney, especially if you've done like a lot of deals, you know how things are going to go. But again, you have to know the legal ramifications of every single line that you sign. Most of the things that are inside of a contract are not even going to pertain to your deal anyway, okay? So that's number 2 is going to be the attorney review. Number 3 is going to be the appraisal. Now, the appraisal is real simple. Let's say, for example, you go under contract for $400,000 and the appraisal comes back at $390,000, all right? So now, since you signed your name to I'm going to pay $400,000, the seller can ask you, even though that the appraisal amount came in at $390,000, so the seller can ask, do you plan to pay the difference between what the appraised value is versus, what the contract value is, which in this case would be $10,000 out of pocket, okay? Now, what buyer wants to do that? You'd be surprised. In 2020 and 2021, there were a lot of people that did that. But either way, typically most buyers say, man, I'm not going to pay that. And sellers, of course, they can't force you to do it, so they end up dropping their price. By the way, that happens 90% of the time. The sellers are just going to drop the price, okay? Then you have it the other way around, where you go under contract for $400,000, but then the appraisal comes in at $410,000, okay? Now what do? You could talk to your lender and then say, hey, lender, if I bump the price up to $410,000, but I ask the seller to give me an additional $10,000 in closing cost credits if the seller agrees, is that okay? You now have to qualify for that new amount, or you could just keep everything the way it is, close the deal out at $400,000, and just know that you have $10,000 worth of equity instantly inside the house, okay? But in some cases where the appraisal comes in short, both parties disagree. And I've had people do this. As crazy as it sounds, for those who don't know, appraisals stick to the property, I believe it's for 6 months, okay? And during that 6-month time frame, so for example, let's say for example you have an FHA loan, you get an appraisal on a house, it's $400,000. The appraisal, you're under contract for $400,000. The appraisal comes in at $390,000. You and the seller can't come to an agreement. You cancel the deal. The seller puts the house back on the market because now you guys canceled that deal. And then that next buyer, if they're an FHA buyer, they're going to get that same exact appraisal. The only way they can use a different appraisal is if they get a different buyer if they get a buyer with a different loan type. So that means now they have to go from FHA to conventional. Don't want to spend too much time on that. Long story short, an appraisal can easily kill a deal as well too. And number 4, this kind of goes into number 2, attorney review. This just goes into basic disagreements. I've seen deals get canceled because of possession, which means the seller says, hey, I'll move out by the closing date. And then we get closer to the closing date, and now the seller says, hey, I need another 2-3 weeks. Well, the buyer's already put things in place to move things out. And so I've seen that disagreement kill a deal. But here, there's a lot of ways to save deals, and there's a lot of ways to kill deals. But those are the 4 ways that deals are going to get canceled, within real estate. All right. So of course, if you like this video, like it. You want to share it. And as always, be sure to subscribe, as we got nothing but great content well on the way. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.